We should have spoken about South Korea yesterday, but there are two reasons why we didn't. One, this was still a developing situation, so we didn't want to chase a moving target. Second, also, the decision on Maharashtra was made. Devendra Fadnavis was chosen as the chief minister. That 11-day suspense had ended. So we thought that that should take the precedence. However, Korea is a very important story. Korea is a very important country. It's also an ally of India's. It's also critical. It's not a member of the Quad, but critical to the success of the Quad and the larger Indo-Pacific project. Because on the other side of the Quad, Korea is very much a part of the alliance. In fact, Quad is not an alliance. India is not an ally with the Western powers, with Japan and Australia, whereas South Korea is. So South Korea is strategically very important. It's a rival of China. It's also been standing up to China. It's a very important country. But also, we need to talk about South Korea because it's in our lives wherever we look. Wherever we look around your room where you are watching. If you're watching it on a big screen, chances are you're watching it on an LG screen or a Samsung screen, Korean screen, or maybe the microwave in your home, or the refrigerator, or the air conditioner, something, there will be something Korean in your lives. Because Korea was among the first countries to take full advantage of the opening up of Indian industry and economy. And they came in first with consumer goods, and then their footprint has increased and increased and increased. And it's been a very happy partnership with South Korea. In the period, India started opening up in 1991. In this period, South Korea has had many political upheavals. It's not a country that's been known to have great political stability. It's had a history of coups, assassinations, prosecution of outgoing rulers, also uncertainty at various points of time. But the real talent of the Koreans lies in the fact that they've been able to immunize their economic activity from what happens politically. At the same time, their politics, their democracy, I know I've seen a lot of questions, especially in social media, that look, here is a country where the president declares the emergency and imposes the martial law, and it's been done so many times in the past, and yet on VDEM kind of rankings, the Swedish VDEM kind of rankings, India features way below South Korea. So what kind of fairness is this in rankings? Good point, good questions. At the same time, democracy came to South Korea very late. Democracy came to South Korea in 1987. That was the first fair, free election in which a president was elected. Until then, mostly South Korea was ruled by generals because this was a country born from war. As Second World War ended, this sort of neatly dovetailed into the Korean War. So just as Germany was divided between the Eastern Bloc, the Soviet Bloc, and the Western Bloc, similarly, Korea was divided. And Kim Il-sung on the North Korean side, he was bigger, he had a bigger army, many more resources. So at one point, Korea was all about to become a communist country, and then the Americans came in, and we know the Korean War, etc., etc. That's a story not for today. It's out of syllabus for today, and probably that's a story one of my colleagues will tell you in the course of time, or maybe if I'm able to persuade him, Praveen Swami will tell you in the course of time because he will know it by heart. So this is a country born out of war. This is a country born out of war which continues to be in a state of war with North Korea. And North Korea is still a much bigger military power. That's why there is a lot of American military presence in Korea as well. And Koreans live in the fear of North Koreans rolling over them because they are more numerous, they are militarily more powerful, they have contiguity with China and Russia, and they are helped by both China and Russia. And also at this point, North Koreans are such close friends and allies of Russia that they have even sent their troops to fight alongside the Russians in Ukraine. These are the complexities in which South Korea or Republic of Korea lives. North Korea is usually called DPRK, or they prefer to be called DPRK, which is Democratic People's Republic of Korea. What democracy, what People's Republic? Those are questions. If you ever run into Kim Jong-un, you can ask him. That said, South Korea or Republic of Korea. the president got fed up. The president got fed up. He got fed up of being a lame duck. Why? Because he got elected more than a year back as president by a wafer-thin margin, by 0.76% margin. It was a very close election. So he won by 0.76%. But this situation, the Korean situation, is also a bit like what's playing out in France. The president is elected directly, and then parliament is elected separately. Executive power, the bigger executive power is with the president. That's what's playing out in France as well, because other parties have, the president's party no longer has majority in his parliament. And as we know, just yesterday, his prime minister was voted out. The prime minister that he appointed, the prime minister who does not have majority, was voted out in parliament over his budget, which involved expense cuts, which involved tough austerity. So these are things, there are similar things playing out in Korea. In Korea also, in the parliamentary election, the opposition won a much larger number. So as we talk today, of the 300-member parliament in South Korea, in Seoul, 192 belong to the opposition. 6 parties of the opposition, mostly it's a Democratic Party, the Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, People's Power Party, PPP, which is the president's party. They are in a minority. So 192 out of 300 are with the opposition. So as a result, he's not been able to pass most of his laws. In fact, until now, the percentage of laws that he and his government proposed, which have been passed, is only 29%, which means nearly 3 out of the 4 laws that he moved in parliament, they were defeated. On the other hand, his opposition can get any number of laws passed because they have the majority. So what's he been doing? The opposition moves their laws. Those laws have the numbers, they get passed. But he uses the president's veto powers to overrule or strike down those laws. As a result, this has become a non-functional government, and he's become a lame duck president. In the middle of this, there are allegations. In Korea, there are always allegations against the rulers. The president, many of them have been tried for corruption. In fact, most of them have been held guilty as charged and also convicted for corruption. Many people, in fact, have been nostalgia. I'm digressing a little bit. Many people in India also have this nostalgia or love affair with the Korean model. And they say, like the Korean model, we should also, our state also should partner with some big industrial houses, big conglomerates, and follow the model of Korean chibols. Chibols is like a Korean name for a conglomerate. And then as the conglomerate is built with state support, the country's economy will be built. So my answer to people who say this often is that that's all right. It worked in Korea, but in the end, almost everybody involved with this, which is the presidents, the leaders, and also the top management, promoters, leaders of these chibols, all went to jail because state and the corporates, conglomerates working together is the definition of crony capitalism. So South Korea has that history. This president has also faced charges of corruption, collusion, stock manipulation. More than him, it's his wife who has faced these charges. Not only has his wife faced these charges, besides stock manipulation, one of the charges against her is also that she accepted a very expensive, super expensive Dior bag as a gift, right? So this is Korean politics for you, and she's been facing that. Basically, the upshot is that the president is very unpopular. He doesn't have the numbers in parliament to get anything done. His writ is not running. So this is the status of Shahenshah Alam, Delhi se Palam, although he's an elected president. But while he may not be such a consummate politician, he knows his politics and diplomacy. He can be a charmer when he wants to be. So when he went on his state visit to America, at his state banquet, he conjured up a situation where he was asked to sing American Pie. This is Don McLean's mega hit, multi-generation mega hit of 1971. So he figured Joe Biden's age and the fact that this must have been a big hit from his youth. So he sang those lines in clear English pronunciation and good memory of lyrics. So he went on, bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Many from my generation would remember that, and maybe from generations after as well. And that is what he got impatient with, and he thought, in exasperation, let me impose martial law, suspend all democratic rights, suspend all political activity, because my constitution, Article 77, gives me the power to do this. I will exercise the power people before me have done in the past. Korea has seen martial law imposed 16 times. But remember, the last time this happened was in 1980. I told you, 1988 onwards, Korea has had an elected government, a fairly elected government, and a very robust democracy, very strong civil society, and a very, very strong protest culture. Even now, within hours of the emergency declaration, there were massive crowds on the street in front of parliament. There were rock bands and concerts going on, and there was mass singing of carols, like Christmas carols, because it's also the holiday season, Christmas season, carols demanding, the lyrics were demanding the impeachment of the president. So Korea also has a very strong street democracy. Now, what is the history, personal history of Yoon Suk Yeol, the president, who's right now skating on very thin ice. He's not gone down under yet, and I will tell you why, but he's right now skating on very thin ice, or maybe just stationary, not even skating, just standing stationary on very thin ice, hoping that this will not melt, that this will hold. Now, he was not really a full-time politician who grew from bottom up. He was actually a prosecutor, not very different from what Kamala Harris might have started as. She also started as a prosecutor, but then she became a politician, etc. Yoon Suk Yeol, Korean names once again, remember, like Chinese name, like Vietnam, like Chinese names, like most names in Eastern Asia. What is seen as the first name, say in our view, to our naked eye, is actually the last name. So it's not Mr. Zedong, it's always Mr. Mao for Mao Zedong. It's not Mr. Enlai for Chou Enlai, it's Mr. Chu. It's not Mr. Jinping, as in Xi Jinping, it's Mr. Xi. Similarly in Korea. So Mr. Yoon Suk Yeol will be Mr. Yoon. Now, for Mr. Yoon, he became famous in 2017 when he prosecuted a former president, one of his predecessors, Park Geun-hye. Park Geun-hye, I will tell you about her. She was the daughter of another president whose first name was also Park. Koreans tend to have very common names, Park, Kim, Lee. You can find them in many places on both sides of Korea. Obviously, it's the same culture. So Park Geun-hye, her father had been the president earlier. Now she was the president. She was tried, and the prosecutor was Yoon Suk Yeol. She was removed for bribery. And impeached by Constitution Court for 3 months, after which poll was held within 2 months. He similarly prosecuted another top leader, Lee Myung-bak. So his reputation was made as a corruption-fighting prosecutor. He had never really built great political equity for himself. It's because of the famous prosecutor that he won his election. Now, since he was a prosecutor, he had not lost his pension for prosecution. So he was also getting his rival who he defeated very narrowly by 0.73% vote margin, and who is seen to be the favorite to win in the next presidential election, if it happens on time, which is 2027. That is Lee Jae-myung, right? So that also made him unpopular. It was in the middle of all this, when he saw that his writ was not running, that he announced this martial law. Now, did he think he'll get away with it? I don't know. He probably thought so. But right now, it looks like he's found himself a scapegoat, that is Kim Young-hyun. Kim Young-hyun was his defense minister. So the allegation is that it's the defense minister who advised him to impose the martial law. So he has first fired him. All right, catch hold of the usual suspect and slaughter him in public. That is done. And he's appointed a new defense minister, that is Choi Byung-hyuk, who was his ambassador in Saudi Arabia. By the way, Choi Byung-hyuk is also a former general. Most of the former rulers or presidents in South Korea have been former generals. Many of them military dictators, but even the first elected one was an army general. And I will go over that list as we go along. Now, the question is, first of all, what happens now? What happens now? People say, I've seen all this discussion to which I referred earlier, that how can South Korea's democracy be rated higher than India's when they have all these problems? That's a very good argument, and I'm not saying that argument is settled this way or that. There is no such thing as a perfect democracy. All democracies are perfect. If somebody says my democracy is perfect, I will say meet President Xi Jinping or Kim Jong-un, because only dictators call their democracies perfect. General Musharraf used to call his country a perfect democracy. He's fought with me personally, as in having an argument with me and saying you have no idea of Pakistan's politics. It's completely changed since you used to travel as a reporter. Your knowledge is outdated. Pakistan is today more democratic than it's ever been. He said that to me as a dictator in public on camera. Ziaul Haq used to think his democracy is perfect. So every dictator says his democracy is perfect and nobody can argue with them. That's why they also grow with the delusion that it's perfect. Now, South Korean democracy is also not perfect, but see what happened when he announced his martial law. He announced his martial law, unlike what would have happened in Pakistan, where everybody would go home and say, the normal has happened. Right now, the normal has happened, isn't it? Because that's why in Pakistan, every coup is bloodless, because it's as if it's an inevitability. Jab hona hai, those guys come, they take over, right? No problem. In this case, thousands of people came out in the streets protesting. I told you the protest culture was out in the street, and even in the past, even in the heyday of dictatorship, tens of thousands have come out. They've been massacred by the police and armed forces. Then those presidents have been prosecuted, given life sentences, death sentences. In some cases, they were given death sentences and pardoned also. Again, we'll go over the rogues gallery in conclusion. But the protest happened, Parliament convened, and immediately the Parliament voted 190-0 to oppose, to reject the martial law. Because martial law, the president has the power to impose the martial law, usually because of military needs, because it's a country in a state of war. But even when he or she does so, then Parliament has to ratify it. In this case, Parliament voted 190-0. Why 190-0, you would say? Because it's a parliament of 300. That's because it seems, in fact, it's quite evident that even members of his own ruling party did not vote in favor of the martial law. They did not vote against it. And right now, the demand is for his impeachment. All those carols being sung by these tens of thousands of people, you will see pictures on your screen. They demand his impeachment, which is where we run into some complexities. And that's the reason I said he's standing on, or maybe a little bit skating on very thin ice. It's getting thinner, but it's still there. He hasn't yet sunk, because for impeachment to take place, 2/3 of this parliament has to vote in favor of impeaching him. 192 are with the opposition. 2/3 of 300 is 200. So the opposition is 8 short. 18 members of his ruling party, People's Power Party, which is a conservative party. In fact, one of his platforms was anti-feminism, and it did not hurt him that the leader that he was prosecuting was a woman, the previous president. Nevertheless, 8 members of his party have to defect and vote for his impeachment. 18 had opposed his declaration of martial law. However, his party leaders are so far saying that we are holding together and we will not break rank and we will not vote in favor of impeachment. If impeachment does not happen, then he can continue as president. He continues as president. His writ doesn't run, right? Nobody listens to him. Opposition has the majority. There is no meeting point between him and the opposition, which has the larger number. So Korea will continue to be in this political uncertainty. So that's one. Does he get impeached or not? Now suppose he gets impeached. Impeachment proceedings begin. He gets impeached. That vote, in fact, on whether he'll be impeached or not is Saturday evening. So Saturday evening, if he's not impeached, I told you, he carries on, a lame duck, but he carries on. Let's see for how long. But If the parliament votes for impeachment, then impeachment goes to a constitutional court. Constitutional court needs Constitutional court usually has 9 judges. Of the 9 judges, 6 have to vote for an impeachment to take place. 6. At this point, that constitutional court has 3 vacancies. Very convenient. What that means is that all 6 judges unanimously then have to vote for impeachment for him to be impeached. If he is impeached, then after that, within a couple of months, a fresh election will be held, which could be as early as in March, February, or maybe March. But otherwise, if that 6-0 verdict, first of all, an impeachment vote has to take place. So 8 members of his party have to vote with it. They have to defect or cross the line. Number two, the constitutional court has to hold hearings, give him a chance of being heard, and give a 6-0 verdict. Right? After that, stage is set for elections, and a fresh election will take place. Otherwise, if he decides to just drag on in the hope that elections will be only in 2027, I think it's too long, and by that time, trouble on the streets will become too formidable for him to handle. Now, he's quite a clever guy. Some of his actions right now might look that he's a bit nutty, but he's quite a clever guy. He knows something about running his politics because, after all, he's run his government so far despite not having a majority in parliament. He's also kept his partners, the American partners, very happy because South Korea is a very close ally of the Americans. They also have American security guarantees. They have a strong American military presence that keeps them protected from North Korea. There's always a clear and present danger of war. And in fact, many analysts have said that while you look at the world and you look at future uncertainty and instability, you look at Europe because of Ukraine, you look at the Middle East, or Taiwan, but the place where things could really blow up is the Korean Peninsula. So for him, Americans are very good partners. He's been very strongly anti-Chinese. That is something his opposition doesn't like. His opposition prefers a better working relationship with the Chinese, whereas he's been very hostile to the Chinese. He's also been very tough on North Korea, whereas his opposition would like a friendlier relationship with North Korea. That is the polarization in Korean politics. Now, I told you I will give you a little bit of rogues gallery and then in the end tell you about some special talents of President Yoon, the incumbent who's currently in trouble. So go back to the South Korean history. Syngman Rhee was the first president. He was president also between 1919 and 25 when the country was together before the Second World War. And even then in 1925, he was impeached. Then the Americans brought him back, and there is a twisted story about how he was brought back after the Second World War. He was brought back by 1948. He had taken over as the president. He became the first president. He served till 1960. He was elected in some kind of elections. Those were very imperfect elections with a lot of rules twisted. In fact, the South Korean constitution then said that the president can't contest for a third time, was limited to 2 terms like the American president, but he came and he changed the constitution, so he gave himself third shot at presidentship. He got how many votes? Guess. He got 100% of the vote. Why? Because his only rival died a few days before the polling, so he went ahead and had the election and got 100% of the vote. He was removed in a coup just after that fake election in 1960. Just after that, he was removed in a military coup in 1960. That was the first military coup in South Korea. So he was removed briefly. He was replaced by Yoon Po-sun, who in turn was removed in a military coup by a general in 1962. In 1962, the strongman of Korea, the man who built modern Korea, but he was a tough military dictator, Park Chung-hee. Park Chung-hee took over 1962 to 1979. He was one of the longest serving dictators. That part of the world, China, North Korea, South Korea, that part of the world had really durable dictatorships. So he was one who lasted 17 years. He ruled in 1979 and was removed, would probably have continued on ruling but for his assassination. So he was assassinated in 1979 to be replaced by Choi Kyu-ha. Choi Kyu-ha had a very short tenure, short tenure of just a few months, and he was thrown out in yet another military coup by a general, by an army general, who became the new dictator. He was Chun Do-hwan. Again, continued to build Korean industry and Korean economy. Chun Do-hwan, he served for 7 years until he was removed. But before he was removed, there were many pro-democracy movements and there were many pro-democracy protests, some of which also resulted in high-handed action by the armed forces and police and deaths of hundreds, if not thousands of people. In fact, I am more inclined to believe accounts that say thousands of people. Because of that, in 1987, he conceded that he will hold an election and give up power after that election. For the election, as candidate, he chose one of his friends, a fellow general who was his friend, that is Roh Tai-woo. Roh Tai-woo was a tough general as well. He contested elections and won, whereas Chun Do-hwan gave up power, but he was subsequently tried for the 1979 coup against Park Chung-hee and for many excesses against democracy activists. He was convicted and later pardoned as well. Similarly, Roh Tai-woo, who succeeded him, Roh Tai-woo, in fact, again was a builder of modern Korea. It was under his watch that Korea hosted its first Asian Games and also its big coming out party, which was the 1988 Seoul Olympic Games. I had the good fortune of going and covering those Olympic Games for India Today magazine. Roh Tai-woo took over in early 1988, year of the Olympics, carried on till 1993. Once again, he was the first directly elected president, but he also got sentenced in 1996 along with his pal Chung Do-hwan for corruption and high-handedness and his role in the 1979 coup. But once again, like his friend, he was pardoned also. So Korea has had this rinse-repeat cycle. Then after him, 93 to 1998, Kim Young-sam, who oversaw both Roh and Chun's convictions. But his reputation got tarnished by the 1997 Eastern Asian financial crisis, where Korea suffered very badly and he was put under house arrest. He was arrested but under house arrest, so not so bad. The next guy, Kim Dae-jung, he is by far the most respected of Korean leaders. 1998 to 2003 he served. He earned the Nobel Peace Prize for improving his relationship with North Korea. However, he had had a tough life before that. In 1973, because he was a democracy activist, in 1973 he was kidnapped by the KCIA, which is the Korean CIA. He was kidnapped by them and charged with all kinds of crimes. Even later, he was charged with many crimes, particularly the charge of leading or causing the uprising of Gwangju. Now, Gwangju uprising is the one where thousands of protesters had died, and that's where his two other predecessors were tried for excesses. Now, he was tried earlier by the dictators for leading that democratic uprising, and after that he went into exile. He taught at Harvard University. Charges against him were sedition, conspiracy, etc. The Americans, the CIA, pulled him out of South Korea and gave him safe refuge in America. He was teaching at Harvard University, from where he came back to lead South Korea between 1998 and 2003. Then came Roh Moo-hyun, 2003 to 2008. He faced impeachment for election violations and corruption and died by suicide while the probe was on. This is a very tough history. This is by no means a boring political system. He died by suicide. He was succeeded by Lee Myung-bak from 2008 to 2013. He was later tried for corruption, convicted, given a 15-year sentence, and then ultimately pardoned. Then came Park Geun-hye. Park Geun-hye is the one that the current president prosecuted. 2013 to 2017, she's the one who was prosecuted by the current president, by President Yoon in 2017. She's the daughter of General Park Chung-hee, the longest-serving Korean dictator, 1962 to 1979. She was prosecuted, impeached, and sentenced for 20 years, but again pardoned, right? And then came Moon Jae-in. Moon Jae-in, 2017 to 2022, the immediate predecessor of Yoon Suk Yeol, the current president. He was suspected in a bribery case involving his son-in-law. He was not arrested and charged, however. So it looks like things have been calming down in South Korean politics. At the same time, the fate of Yoon Suk Yeol will now tell us what happens from now on. Will the same cycle of prosecution, impeachment, sentencing, and maybe pardon will be repeated? We don't know.